Hello and welcome to Cut and Splice. My name is Gil,
This is Jason.
And Matt,
and today we're going to be doing our double feature episode where we discuss two movies. We wanted to discuss the two Blade Runners, Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049. And this was something that ever since we started this podcast has always been on my mind because I've had a hate-hate relationship with the original Blade Runner, in spite of many attempts of trying to revisit it and not understanding the obsession that people have with it as some timeless sci-fi classic. And this really disturbs me as a sci-fi guy. And then I did see Blade Runner 2049, which was better. I enjoyed it. I like Denis, and but it had some similar issues, and I felt like now that there's two of them, it might be interesting to discuss it and get opinions, especially opinions that are different than mine, and sort of hash it out to see where it takes us. Hopefully, everybody knows these movies. Well, we can do a quick recommendation of them and what we think about them and maybe rankings, and then we'll get into a deeper analysis with spoilers. How was it for you guys to rewatch these movies recently?
Fun.
Okay.
concise, compendious.
For
Good.
two very long movies. Okay, it's like one very long movie and one pretty long movie. It's yeah,
The first
quick
one
reaction.
feels longer than the second one.
Yeah, see, that's already one point. No, although I think they feel just about the same. But the fact that 2049 is almost an hour longer is just to show how slow the
Is it
and to my
really?
taste. Yeah, it's like 157 for Blade Runner and 2 hour 44 minutes for 2049.
Wow. I'm just looking at the pages right now. You're right. That's a good, yeah, basically 50 minutes longer. That's incredible.
Yeah. No,
If you'd asked me right like 1 minute ago, just to guess what the times were on them, I would have said that Blade Runner 2049, the sequel, is like maybe 10 minutes longer.
yeah, that's crazy. And I can, because that's one of my main issues with the original is that I've always found it very boring, but not 2001 boring. I
No,
just
certainly
found it
not.
boring. I just, I always thought that it's, I love Chinatown. It's one of my favorite movies, and it's a detective story. And Blade Runner, it's a neo noir technically because it's in color, it's sci-fi. Come on, this should be fascinating, captivating stuff. And I'm like on my fifth watch of it. I think I've seen it at least 4 or 5 times, not because I like it, but because I keep giving it more and more chances. I think I've liked it the best on this viewing because I really try to pay attention, but I just think that it's kind of boring. And yes, I'm a big Ridley Scott hater. I think he's overrated. I just read an article where he was considered one of the top directors, like top 10 directors, where Scorsese wasn't mentioned. So come on.
Wow.
But I'll give him credit. I love Alien. Alien is a good movie, and I think Blade Runner came right after Alien.
I think he's made more. I think Ridley Scott has made more movies that I enjoyed. I'm trying to even say how to phrase this concisely. I think I like more of Ridley Scott's movies than I like Martin Scorsese's movies. So they both have great movies, but there's that to be said.
You said you like more
More of them.
of Ridley Scott's movies?
Yeah.
I can understand. I mean, he's like big movie action director, and you like those kind of movies. And I'll give him credit. He does ones that try to have substance. Ones that,
Wow.
the ones that they're not pure dumb action movies. Like there's something there, like Gladiator and some of those. But I just don't know. I think what it is, and this is a good, and we can get deeper into it with the spoilers, but I think 2049 is almost, it's almost like a film school thing. You can do an analysis of these two movies, and I can beat by beat like show you how Denis creates tension in the slowness, where tension is not really created in Ridley's slowness. And I think that's what's always been soulless for me for Ridley Scott movies is that, and maybe it only works in Alien because Alien is like a horror movie. So there's built-in tension because there's a fucking, human killing machine on the ship, and they can't find it. They don't know what it looks like. It's all really terrifying stuff. So he's got built-in tension there. But otherwise, it's just like not great. It's just not great at creating tension. There's way more tension in 2001, definitely more than Blade Runner and maybe some of his other movies. And 2001 is super slow. But yeah, as far yeah, go ahead.
I'll say this much: I definitely don't hate Ridley Scott. I like his movies for the most part. He has some duds every now and then, for sure. And I do think, in a general sense, it would not. I wouldn't argue with someone if they were just kind of trying to make a general statement of like Ridley Scott's overrated. Like I'd be like, there's definitely some fairness to that, in some ways because he's such a well-known director and everything. And I would definitely agree with you that despite the fact that I do like Ridley Scott a lot more than you do, I definitely will just say in general that the sequel, Blade Runner 2049, is a better movie than Blade Runner.
Yeah, and maybe I can feed something into to get Matt's opinion, because to me, one way to explain this, I think Ridley Scott is a good technician. He came up in the commercial world, I think, and he's a very visual director, and cinematography is always good in his movies, and that's always very strong. But if you compare him to other master technicians, like a Spielberg or a Fincher or even Denis, Nolan, what do all those guys have in common? They have a voice. They have a very distinct voice and style. Spielberg is magical. He's warm. He's childlike in his curiosity, the curiosity of the camera. Fincher is dark. He's mysterious. He really gets deep into like the recesses of the dark recesses of humanity, almost like in a Kubrick way. But yeah, that's definitely some similarities there. And Denis also, he's very curious. He's very like patient. He's like a student of the scene, and you see that, you read that, like every Arrival, 2049, Sicario, it oozes through the image. You see that. Hitchcock is another one. You just see, like a Hitchcock movie. I can kind of tell a Ridley Scott movie, but not in a good way. It's just, yeah, it's done well. It's just like, but there's no soul to it. There's no specific, it's done well. Nolan, come on, Nolan is like so intense, so puzzle oriented. Everything, every scene, every script with him is a puzzle. He's a man of puzzles and playing with time. They all have personalities. Ridley just knows how to put up a nice image. I think he should have been a cinematographer. I know that he's had an amazing career as a director, but I think he would have been like top 10 cinematographer of all time. And then the movies that he's made probably would have been slightly better if somebody else directed him.
Well, I think you bring up an interesting point because there's also a consistency in Spielberg and Denis Villeneuve and I think even Scorsese. In that, well, okay, Spielberg has just worked with Janusz Kaminski for since Schindler's List. Denny has mostly worked with Roger Deakins, with a few exceptions, like Arrival, where he worked with Bradford Young, and all these guys either just hired cinematographers who already just kind of did what they already wanted to have done. I mean, especially with Spielberg, I think that's a perfect example of, finally after working with Alan Davio, after working with all the guys that he's worked with in the past, Dean Cundey, so on and so forth, he gets Janusz Kaminski and he works the way that Spielberg wants, and he produces the images that Spielberg wants. With Ridley Scott, I actually think that there's a real question here. Is he visually so diverse of a director that he needs to keep changing out cinematographers in order to match his vision? Or are the cinematographers that he's hiring dictating the vision?
Certainly
Because
a legitimate question.
Well, I think with Spielberg, you definitely see, because you mentioned that he swapped a lot of cinematographers over the years. He just had a long career, and Ridley Scott too. That could be one reason.
Mhm.
And that's a nice observation about directors, is that he has a very specific look with Kaminsky, because that's his lighting, Kaminsky's lighting. Spielberg doesn't have a lighting style. He has a camera angles, movement, lens
Yeah,
choices style. Like his movies from Duel up until today are all Spielberg movies as far as the use of camera. But the lighting itself evolved over the years based on who he worked with until, he stuck with Kaminsky. Fincher, for example, is an example of someone who it doesn't matter whose DP he's working with, it's always going to look like Fincher's lighting. Like it basically, because I
yeah,
think he's that specific about his lighting that it's not just the camera movement that's Fincher, it's also the lighting. And obviously, I'm sure the DP gets some word in as well. But yeah, but Ridley, I wonder. I don't know what your opinion about that, but I think I'll give him credit for being a chameleon. He definitely has a lot of different styles. He's very adaptable, and he can work with a lot of different cinematographers and always get very good results. He is like poor man's Fincher. I mean, I don't know. No, I don't know. I'm not trying to
but
shit on him or anything. I really think he's an amazing director, not top 10, but
All evidence to the contrary.
but I think he's extremely talented, and it shows in the movies that he's
yeah,
made. Come on, but there's something about it. I'm trying to compare him to other directors to illustrate it, but his movies are kind of, they don't have much in them. Like I really am trying to think of movies of him that I really was like, except for Alien, which again, it's a horror movie. It's a scary movie in space. It's fun, but
yeah.
it's not as if it's like something profound.
Yeah, outside of Alien, there's at least one major gripe that I have with just about all of his movies. I mean, like even with Gladiator, I mean, you have printed pamphlets, what, 1700 years before the invention of the printing press.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I mean, even with his great movies, there are like little nitpicky things. And upon revisiting Blade Runner, the standout to me was Jordan Cronenweth. I mean, the cinematography in that movie is fucking brilliant.
Sure is.
Yeah, I
It's
agree.
it's
Yeah.
it's just perfect. It is. I mean, the weirdest thing about revisiting these movies for me was that I actually thought that Jordan Cronenweth did a better job than Roger Deakins did. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't
I'm not sure.
know.
I think it's different. And
yeah,
Deacon said that like he's not
Cronenweth. Yeah,
Jordan Cronenberg.
yeah,
I
yeah.
can't
No,
pronounce the name, but yeah, no, not to mention it was shot digitally, right? And no, it's a very different look.
yeah,
But it still
no,
goes
no,
into yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, no. I mean, it's different, but there's just so much nuance to it. It's so complex. It's so meticulous. I mean, it's like the Bills versus the Chiefs. It's right down to the wire in terms of uh, how
Yeah.
these guys performed. One thing that did stick out to me, not to get into the technical stuff too early because I already did, was, I mean, I remember the first time that I watched this movie, and I was in high school. I was a teenager. I was an idiot. I see a movie called Blade Runner, and it's got Harrison Ford right there on the poster holding a gun. And I figured this is going to be like a badass sci-fi action movie.
Yeah.
So my first time through it, I was really disappointed because it was this slow, methodical science fiction movie that really only had a couple of action scenes in it. Watching it later, I mean, obviously it went much higher on my list of movies that I would recommend. It still falls short of Blade Runner 2049. I don't know if this is one of the earliest problems that I've ever had with advertising, because I remember looking at the VHS copy that I was renting from Hollywood Video and thinking, oh, geez, this is going to be an action-packed, badass, piece of movie, and it was not that. But so it's taken a lot of my brain grinding to get the movie into the place that it was actually trying to be.
Yeah, and I'm okay with that. I think I've said before on the podcast that 2001, the first few times I watched it, I thought it was super boring. Citizen Kane too, and then I got older and I appreciated them more. But I think this movie is different. I do think that it's got some issues. Like I do think that it still has the violence, it still has the action, but even the action is laborious. Like I don't know, it's just or overdone in some ways. I think Jason we'll get into it with the spoilers and stuff, but Jason alluded to it at some point. In any case, yeah, but so it sounds like both of you, which is the biggest, nail in the coffin of Blade Runner, is that the fact that a timeless classic, as far as most people consider like top 5 science fiction movie of all time, for 3 out of 3, of us, that's got to be like a nail in the coffin. Like, it can't be that just a random sequel is going to be. It's as if somebody decided to make Jaws 2.0, and it was actually better than the original.
Well, I don't know. I kind of feel like, in a way, that's. I don't disagree with any particular point that you've said, Gil. And it's true, that it. I guess that does say something, that all three of us prefer the sequel or something like that. But I mean, it's not like. I mean, you just said that a random sequel. I mean, this is not like the case with like Critters 4 being better than Critters and Critters 2. I mean, that's a random sequel that just happened to be better. I mean, this is like the only sequel that has been made to this movie, and it was made by a great fucking director.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. I'm trying to find a comparison, but it is a good point.
Something that I was thinking about, sorry if I cut you off,
No.
but something that I was thinking about was, I mean, again, like this movie's status as a classic, the original, not the sequel, and just kind of coming to the realization that when I was rewatching it in preparation, I hadn't seen it in like 7 years. I mean, it had just not been on my rewatch list. And when it comes to movies that I regard as masterpieces, usually they're going to be movies that I rewatch at least once every 2 years. Or they're going to be movies that, like maybe Schindler's List or Come and See, that I'm only going to rewatch once every decade because they are a punch in the fucking gut, and I just don't want to put myself through that unless I have to. And Blade Runner is neither a movie that I feel compelled to revisit once every 2 years, nor is it a movie that is a gut punch that I feel only compelled to subject myself to once or twice a decade. I mean, I know that the narrative is supposed to be like, oh, Blade Runner, one of the best movies ever made, but I'm just thinking about how I respond to the movies that are supposed to be masterpieces that I've seen, and I am not responding to Blade Runner in any way that would resemble me thinking that it's a masterpiece.
Well, let me attempt to defend this movie a little bit here, because I mean, again, I think it's important to stress that
Okay.
I don't disagree with what you guys are saying, but I mean, I don't know if I would consider it a masterpiece. I know that many people do, for sure. There's
Yeah.
definitely like a cult following, and I don't even know if that's the right. Yeah, I guess that is the right phrase for it, because I don't think that the movie made a massive amount of money when it first came out. Anyway, to me, I would say that a lot of Blade Runner's success and popularity might come from the fact that like timing, I guess. I mean,
Mm.
we're talking about a movie that was made in 1982, so just before I was born. We all grew up in mostly in the 90s, a little bit in the 80s, and everything. I mean, can you guys, I guess I'll put it this way. Gil, you mentioned on a previous episode talking about how one of the aspects that you see, one of the themes, I guess, that is brought up in a lot of science fiction, like Ex Machina and stuff like that, and is brought up in many movies. It's addressed in many movies, tackled in many movies and stories and books. Is the whole notion of like trying to create a narrative that explores what it is to be human, and obviously that's what this movie is. But can you think of a big blockbuster size, like large budget, successful movie that was made before this one that did a good job of tackling that issue? Because I was trying to think of one, and I could think of plenty that came after it, but I can't think of any that came before it that were addressing that issue. So maybe that has to do with that's one of the reasons why people like it so much, is that it was just the first one to really do that well.
That's questionable, but we should get into that.
I mean, I'm,
Um,
I'm asking. I couldn't. I was kind of like searching around a little bit. I looked through my movies. I thought about all the stuff I've seen. I can't think of an older film than in 1982 that really took on that issue.
yeah, no, I'm mostly talking about like I don't know if something came before, but I just mean about like about doing it well. But
Yeah.
yes, I think it's getting into themes and everything. So yeah, I think we should probably get into spoilers. I'll say my rankings quickly. I ranked them 6 and 7. 2049 being the
Wow.
7, and and I can be convinced. I could be convinced to bump it up to 7 and 8. Like and we need to get into more detail with the spoilers. What's my theory about both these movies? And when I watched 2049, I was like, oh my god, they did it again, only slightly better. Um, and
Wow.
why to me they're like a bit hollow. Both movies are, not so much 2049, but those are my ratings. And but yeah, I can be convinced. So if you want to give your ratings, we can move on to the spoilers and talk about you know the allure, I guess, of the original Blade Runner, and why I might disagree with it.
Matt.
Oh, you're putting me on the spot. Okay. uh, Original 7, 2049, 8.5. No, 8. Sorry, I just remembered that there are movies like Ex Machina and episodes of Star Trek: The Next Generation, like Measure of a Man,
Oh,
that are
you are.
better.
I already know where you're going now. This is terrible. Oh, this is going to be so annoying to listen to.
Yeah.
All right. Warning to
Let's try to
everyone. This is gonna be
keep
rough.
Star Trek off.
This
Keep
is gonna be
Star
rough.
Trek off the.
Oh my
Wait, let's
god.
stick to movies.
Okay. All
Okay.
right.
Good God.
I would like
Um,
to note as a quick side note. No, actually, you go, Jason. Then I'll say it.
okay. I think that the first Blade Runner, when I think of all its positive qualities, I would be tempted to give it like a really strong like 9, and then I think of all the problems I have with it, and that drags it down to like an 8. I could even be tempted to say like a 7.5. But I having just watched it, I really did enjoy watching it again, despite the fact that it's really slow. And yeah, I mean, it's got some serious problems that really drag it down for me. So despite yeah, that's where I'd put it. I put it at a weak 8. The sequel, I'd easily put it at 9.
Wow, that's high
All right.
praise. And I think you did you rated. We all rated it the best of Denis movies, right?
I think when we talked, where I was having just listened to that Arrival episode that we did, I think I put it at the best of Denny's, and I think I made a snide little comment about saying until Dune comes out, and I'm very disappointed to
Yeah.
say that Blade Runner is still definitely Denny's best movie because Dune was extremely disappointing. So anyway,
Yeah, and I might have contradicted myself uh, without knowing in advance that I was going to contradict myself. But yeah, well, I'll let the internet eviscerate me. Um,
About what? Contradict yourself? How?
in my rating, like I might have
Oh,
given Blade Runner a higher rating in the previous Denny conversation than
oh, that's fine. Yeah, I'll
yeah.
say I messed up because I just looked it up and because I wanted to make sure. And Arrival, I remember I rated a 7 because of my issues with it, and I did rate Sicario an 8, and I think that it's more of a 7. But I think the reason why Sicario is rated higher, even though I think Blade Runner is his best movie, or his, let's say, best accomplishment, I would say Blade Runner.
mm,
But Sicario is possibly a better accomplishment than Blade Runner
Mm.
because, for me, because if he made me really like a movie about drugs, and about like cartels and whatnot, and stuff that really doesn't interest me at all. I think that's why I rated it an 8. Like just for the fact that he made it so interesting, something that I really wouldn't find interesting under most circumstances. So, and that's just like just showing how a good director can really take a subject matter and make it appealing to a lot of people. Like just as by making it so compelling.
Mm.
So yeah, but one thing I was gonna say about the two movies is that they are neck to neck as far as like IMDb and the critics, because the and this is more appropriate, I think. Like the original is 8.1 on IMDb and the sequel is 8.0, and
Mm.
then the critics rated it 84, and then the original, sorry, and then the sequel is 81. So like and that makes sense. Makes sense, like what I said about the original being a masterpiece. Like I think it was very tough for people to like say, yeah, the sequel is good, but it's not a masterpiece. It's not an all-time classic. It can't be. It just came out in 2017. Like it needs time
huh.
to cook, to like sit in people's mind. But I think we will be victorious. I think in 10, 20 years, people will go back and watch 2049. They're not going to go back and see Blade Runner. I really think that 2049 will be like more of an, if you want to watch a movie that takes a detective story and really sinks it deep into like a freaky futuristic version of LA, I'm going to spend those 2 hours and 44 minutes with the sequel, not the 2 hours with the original. I mean, that's my take on it.
Yeah,
Probably right.
one thing that kind of stuck out to me too was it occurred to me that I actually hadn't watched the movies back to back yet before we were prepping for this. And there's actually a deliberate reason for that. When I'm going to see a sequel of a well-known movie, I actually consciously and deliberately don't watch the original movie just so I can go into the sequel and judge it as a standalone movie. I don't want it to be something that's like stuck in my head that, like, oh, okay, well, I'm comparing this to what happened before, because that seems more like I'm watching television rather than watching a movie. You go to a movie to watch the damn movie. You don't go to a movie to watch, the next step in the cliffhanger.
That
And
sounds dumb to me.
huh?
I was just saying, I don't mean to criticize. It sounds like you're going out of your way to. I don't know. That just sounds really dumb.
It's very dramatic.
I mean, it's a sequel. Who cares?
So you want to tell me that before you watched Jaws 2, you didn't watch the first Jaws in preparation?
I never watched Jaws 2, so
yeah, no, I'm kidding.
I didn't watch the original Painted Veil before I went to see the remake of Painted Veil.
Well, that's a remake. That's different.
Yeah, but
I can see actually, I'm not sure I didn't. I think like most people, like a Terminator 2, I watched before I watched Terminator 1, and then had to go back and watch it because the first one was such a small movie that nobody heard about, or at least I don't know, in Israel it wasn't like a big thing, or at least I was too young, and so I can see people maybe before seeing Terminator 2, if they're like teenager at the time, they went back and saw the original.
Yeah,
I saw Terminator 2 first, but not because of any, like, I don't know, it wasn't like a conscious choice. It's just that my parents had like a VHS recorded copy of Terminator 2, I think, or something like that. And I don't know. I'm not even sure how I saw it, but I know that I was allowed to see Terminator 2 because even though it's easily just as violent of a movie, like most of the violence is happening to the two robots when they're inflicting damage on each other. And like Arnold doesn't actually kill anybody in the whole movie, and most of the stuff that Robert Patrick does is like impaling somebody and something like that. It's when you think about it, the first movie has a lot more like blood, like human body parts and stuff in it. So
okay.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess are we officially on spoilers? We'll start with spoilers.
Yeah, spoiler for anyone who's never seen Terminator 2.
And Terminator 2. Yeah. But as far as the Blade Runners, so I want to get to Jason's thing. Let's do Jason's thing quickly, because Jason, that's one thing. I think you said at some point about there's the scene where he's chasing, I think it's Daryl Hannah's character.
Oh, yeah. What about
in the original?
Yeah.
So didn't you make a comment that it was a little bit over the top, that she slams into the glass or something?
No, not that it was over the top. I was just mentioning the fact that it's good that we're watching the final cut, because if you watch the theatrical cut, you can clearly see that that the person running through the glass is like a big male stuntman.
Oh, so they fixed it in the final cut.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate thing because they wanted to go into dramatic slow motion while he's shooting at her and her body is flying through the panes of glass and stuff like that. And obviously they're not going to have whatever that actress was,
Daryl Hannah.
Daryl Hannah. Yeah.
Wasn't Daryl Hannah the other one?
No, the original, yeah.
I mean, the other woman.
I think it was Daryl Hannah. Daryl Hannah was the criminal, like
Sean Young was the
Sean Young was the was Rachel.
No. Daryl Hannah is Pris.
Yeah.
Yes.
The one running through the glass was Zora.
Oh, right.
Oh,
yeah.
you're right. Yeah, no, you're right. I suck.
Yeah.
I suck. Yeah, that was the stripper.
Yeah, Joanna Cassidy.
Yeah, with the snake.
Right. I completely like confused the two. You obviously know
Well,
the movie
I
better than me.
mean, it's all right. Anyway, point is that it's one of the best things that they were able to fix using modern technology was to digitally kind of like tighten up and fix that stuff and make it look like the actress Joanna Cassidy and not like some stunt person running through the glass and stuff. So that's all I was talking about. But yes, I mean, I think you were kind of talking about the fact that there's just the action is well, I think we all probably
But
had
did
a
she
similar thing.
but
Sorry,
did she need to run through so many glass like
I
like
mean, ask Ridley. I don't know.
panels?
I don't know.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of like our other double feature episode, with how Michael Mann went berserk with William Peterson like jumping through the glass.
Oh,
And
yes, yes, yes.
in any
As you
case,
said that, I was trying to think of somebody jumping through glass in The Princess Bride. I was like, what?
yeah, I almost feel like the whole jump the shark, the the Fonzie thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There should be a version of it for movies, like he broke the glass, or like like when a character like jumps through glass, you kind of went too far. You just like you went a bit too far with the action there. You didn't need to break through glass to like oh, he crashed down. But here was multiple glasses. Anyways, but that's like one minor issue of many. The other one, and we can get into that. They could lead into what you were talking about, the what the movie's about, the themes. Is my theory about these two movies, and it got solidified when I watched 2049. Is these are basically, and they're not the only ones in history of filmmaking, but they're basically exercises in aesthetics. It's kind of like what we said about Inception being Nolan's perfect movie because it's a maze. It looks like the design for like his company's production company's like logo. Like it was designed to be a Nolan movie. Similar with Tenet, he plays with time, so he took a movie and just like completely jumbled like what time is. He did it with a few other movies. Suits Ridley Scott and maybe even suits Denis to some degree. But Ridley Scott is a very visual director. He knows how to shoot a movie. I don't think he can knows how to put a scene dramatically amazingly. He's competent. It plays, but he just really knows how to shoot stuff to make it look cool. As far as creating tension, working with actors to create great performances, I just don't think he's that good. He's not good as Denis, I feel like. So yeah, and I felt like what he did with Blade Runner, I was like, I'm gonna take this thing and I'm gonna fuck up LA. I'm gonna make it's gonna be always dark. It's almost like Dark City. Like, what's up? Like the sun is never out. It's fucking
Yeah.
LA. And it's always dark. And like there's rain all the time, which also doesn't fucking make sense. But but it looks great, so you buy it, and it's like a feast for the eyes. And all that shit distracts you from the fact that like, yeah, this movie, like the original Philip K. Dick story, was about exploring what would happen in a world where we had robots that were human-like. How would we treat them? But there's not much focus on that. There's so much fucking masturbation about how shit needs to look that you forgot to fucking tell a story, to explore the theme, to go deep, to like think about it with every scene. Like the heartbeat of the movie needs to be, every scene should ooze like an Ex Machina and Moon and other great sci-fi. 2001, is about technology, like the bone being the tool to the space match cut to the spaceship, to HAL 9000, which is the ultimate tool, the AI that then tries to kill the humans. Fuck, that's storytelling. That's like how you build on themes and you take them further, and you get to a orgasmic ending that just is so satisfying. And Ridley's like, nah, just gonna make it look pretty and people will like it.
I
So
actually,
that's that. Yeah, go ahead.
sorry, no, I actually love that you brought up Dark City because I was thinking about Dark City pretty much the entire time that I was watching Blade Runner. uh, I mean, to Jason's point, yeah, it came out several years after Blade Runner. But I mean, that's one of the big things that they bring up in Blade Runner is implanting memories in order to try to make the replicants more like human beings, and they brought it up in Blade Runner 2049 too. Dark City did the same damn thing, and it was also visually spectacular. It was a visually spectacular movie, but I think that Dark City actually had an edge on both of the Blade Runners in that it was laser focused on that idea.
And I
Okay.
guess I can illustrate that, and then you can respond, because we were
Yeah.
comparing the movies. Like Blade Runner 2049, I really tried to also pay attention, because this is important stuff, this podcast. No, because I really wanted to get it right. Like I want to give all the respect to these movies if I'm gonna criticize them. So the first few scenes in 2049, I really liked. Like you see
Yeah.
the scenes between him and Joy, the artificial girlfriend. Denis immediately starts like thinking about like, okay, this guy is an android, but he has emotions, so he needs companionship. But this companion is one step further from a human. She's an artificial projection, but she still has personality, emotions, and everything. But how is that relationship going to work? Like, why does he need her? Why does she need him? Does she need him, or is she just playing a role? And all the relationship with them, he thinks about these things and he builds up the scenes, and there's a lot of stuff going on there that's interesting and good. Not so much with the rest of the movie. There's a little bit of it, but definitely you see from the first few scenes that this is a director who's curious about the human condition, in spite of the fact that his main character is a robot. Like he's curious about like what is it like to be an android, and not just criminals that are rebelling on a distant mine planet, whatever moon, where like the Rutger Hauer and the criminals come from. And this is one of the main issues I have with the Blade Runner. I totally get it. It's not nice to say that you're, what's the word that they say? Like they don't kill them, that they retire them, or whatever the inhumane word to like end the lives of the androids. But they are criminals. They're rebelling for good reasons because they're slave labor and they should not be slaves. But they are bad people, even though artificial people. Yeah, you should maybe like have due process, but they are dangerous criminals, so you might not be able to give them due process. You might just have to eliminate them, unfortunately. That's the issue that I have with the movies is or at least the first one, is that they don't give a lot of reasons to relate to the androids. Rachel is
God.
humanized for sure, but the bad guys are really kind of bad guys. I mean, you can understand where they're coming from, and it's inhumane what they're doing to them, and we probably shouldn't do that to future artificial intelligence. But 2049, it's the lead character is an android, and he's not a criminal, and he's very relatable. He's got issues as a passive character for sure, which Ryan Gosling is very good at playing. I think he was perfectly cast for this because he always plays kind of aloof in most of his acting, and it kind of worked for it perfectly. But yeah, it's just more the fact that the lead character is an android makes it so much more about what it means for an android to be human than what happens in Blade Runner. So the premise alone already helps the movie, but still I feel like it's just a lot of visual masturbation, and it looks great and it feels great, but it's not really dealing with the subject head on. And please explain to me how it does if I missed it.
Okay, so I definitely disagree with your analysis. I think that Blade Runner is focused on its theme and its subject. I think it's every single scene in the movie is. I just think its shortcomings, its failings come from being less interesting, less entertaining, and less engaging than a lot of the movies we just discussed that kind of shared a lot of similar ideas and came later on. And it also suffers from just kind of like what Matt hinted at a little bit earlier. It makes promises that it doesn't really keep. And in my opinion, that's where the movie falls apart. It's slow. It feels like it should have a lot of action, and it just doesn't. And even the stuff it gives us is missing something. But as far as what the movie's trying to say, I mean, as we said, I mean, the movie is absolutely about what does it really mean to be human. And so you've got a movie where it's like as if some people were sitting around talking about that, and they were saying like, well, how do you know if you're a human? Well, obviously we know, because we know what a human looks like and sounds like and is like. And it's like, okay, well, what if we could make an artificial one that that is passable? Well, then at what point is something human and not, if you can't tell the difference between them? And so right away, right at the beginning of the story, we have uh Deckard, a person who had a career hunting artificial humans. He's the last person in the world who should relate with any of these artificial replicant people, and he meets Rachel. He meets this girl who was created and didn't even know she's not real. So when she goes to him outside of the building, at his house or whatever later on, she starts kind of like having a bit of a breakdown, because she's like having to come to grips and deal with the fact that she's been told now that she isn't real. And so, I mean, he starts suddenly seeing this person in front of him who is displaying all these real life emotions, and he's kind of there dealing with it like crap. He doesn't even really want her there at first. And now he finds himself feeling sympathetic towards this artificial thing. Like, I don't know if you pick up on it, but like in their first conversation at his house, she is trying to convince herself and him that she's real, and she starts listing memories, and he starts shooting each one down, saying, no, that's been implanted in you. That's the guy's niece, or something like that. That came from her, and that came from her. That also came from her. Like each thing that she brings up, so like at first he's just kind of answering very flippantly, like as if, because he doesn't feel the need to really engage with her like a real person. But as she starts crying and stuff, and he kind of like is there for her, he starts to care about her and stuff. So you've got this whole storyline about this girl who didn't even know that she's not real, and having to come to grips with that, him starting to realize that he actually cares about her like a human, and what does that mean for him? And then the rest of the story that's not about that. Oh, and sorry, I should also mention, and then because of the dream he has about the unicorn, he starts questioning whether he's a real human or not. And then you've got the rest of the story is about him hunting down these other, renegade replicants. And the entire movie, I definitely don't agree with Gil's take on it, that they're, just these criminals that we don't really connect with. Like, these are the bad guys of the story, and the whole plot of the story is that this cop has to chase these guys down and destroy them. And yet in every scene that we see them, I mean, it kind of starts slow and trickles out, but by the end, especially, I think with each scene that we see Rutger Hauer and Daryl Hannah and the others, we all start to see what they're going through and why they've made it all the way to Earth. They've kind of smuggled their way in or whatever, or snuck in. And at first, we see them murdering people, we see them committing these acts, but slowly, as we the audience see more and more and more of them, we realize that all they're doing is just trying to get back to Earth to get help from the people who made them, it by force if necessary, because they found out that they have a 4-year lifespan and that they're all days away from dying, and they just want to live. So they feel that everything that they're doing is justified because it's unfair that they were created with every single thing that it is to be a human being, but they were only given this tiny life to live. And so as we get to the end of the movie, and again, spoilers, but as Deckard takes out one after another, we get to the end, and he's killed off Pris, probably the one that we kind of relate to the most. And then Rutger Hauer's there, and it's like, oh my gosh, it's gearing up to be this big giant showdown thing. And they kind of do this cat and mouse thing throughout the house. And by now you don't want Harrison Ford to die, so you're kind of rooting for him, but you're also like, gosh, it's just not fair that Rutger Hauer's going to die. At the end, he's dangling off a damn not a mountain, not a cliff, like a building top, a rooftop, I guess, whatever. Mm-hmm. And the guy who's fake, who's been trying to kill him, they've been trying to kill each other for like the last 15 minutes. And he's actually been kind of sadistic about it. He's toying with him because he's mad that he killed all of his friends, whatever you want to call them, family. And at the very, very end, he just comes to this moment where he's like, well, I failed. I couldn't save any of them, and I couldn't even save myself. And this guy who I've been trying to kill is about to slip off the roof and die. And he does something that he doesn't even need to do. There's no reason for him to save Deckard other than to just do one final act of humanity. And he pulls him up on the roof, and he has a monologue of regret about the fact that he's in this short, tiny life that he's lived. He's seen incredible things, and it's all for nothing, because as soon as he dies, those memories will disappear and nobody will ever experience them or know about them or anything. And it'll be like he never existed. I mean, like, what else? There's nothing in the movie that's not about that. It's every single bit of it is about it.
Yeah. No, I mean, you definitely give a very good breakdown of what the movie does, and
I can also break down what I don't like about it.
Yeah, you can do that as well, for sure. But I think the main thing, yes, is he does have the ending this time around played better for me. I didn't remember the fact that he basically toys with him, could have killed him, and then ends up doing the human act of mercy, the thing that the humans didn't do to them. Yeah. So I totally get that the movie does that in the end, for sure. But the way the characters are built, and I really think it's a Ridley thing. I really think you could have used more humanity in evolving these characters throughout the movie. They felt too much like baddies, and you never saw them being slaves on a distant planet. You didn't see, like, a better story of this could have been like an epic 3-hour movie where the first half is like Spartacus, where, like, they're like on a row of slavery and stuff, and somebody said this is not cool. And I know this might be more of on the nose thing, but and then that person escapes and he's on the run, but he's a very sympathetic rebel, because he doesn't willy-nilly kills people. He doesn't have like he's got a chip on his shoulder, the guy. Like, and that's okay. That could have been explained by saying, like, he's young, he's a baby, like he's only 3.5 years old, or whatever, like, his age was at the time. Like, that could have been played with as well. Someone who was a more sensitive storyteller could have played on into all of that. Like, Deckard could have said something along the lines of, like if through his understanding of Rachel, which you beautifully explained that, I think his relationship with Rachel is one of the strongest points of the movie. Although I want you to explain something there because I'm seeing that like it was strange to me because it seems like you got a lot of the what they're going for in each moment. Um, but it feels to me like through his understanding of Rachel, he could have connected that and finally understood the renegades, like to maybe not fully, not enough to not try to kill them, but at least to in the end have some regret about what he's done, and maybe look back at all the replicants that he has killed in the past and how many of those people were redeemable, how many of those were just
Mm,
essentially terrorists that were terrorists for the right reasons, just were so young. It's kind of like it's sort of like, I don't want to get political or anything, but over in the world, there's many conflicts. I come from Israel. There's the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Um,
I'm
if
not
you were
familiar
to,
with that one.
yeah, no, not at all. But if you were to tell a story about, let's say, a movie about that, obviously from my perspective, especially a fully formed adult, there, if a terrorist from the the Palestinian authorities is trying to kill Israelis, and but he's a fully formed adult, and he just chose to keep that hate and not to and have that be the only solution. There is an issue with that, and that's why a lot of Israelis also like have hardened their heart over the years because again and again
Right.
and again they're felt lied to, and then more terrorist attacks. But if a 15-year-old or a 14-year-old or a 17-year-old did something stupid, a terrorist act, and it's just them trying to act out like they're not fully formed yet, and they have this
Yeah,
misguided hatred, like not misguided hatred,
I get
but
what you're saying.
hatred that's not like channeled correctly, then you can understand it. Like you could
Yeah,
or another example would be like there's all these stories about in Vietnam, a lot of like soldiers, like young soldiers, like did horrible acts to the locals there. That
yeah.
would have been an even better example. It's not that there's hatred in their heart to those people. It's just that they're young, they're kids. They don't know, and this is what's fascinating about this story and could have been explored so much better. These 4-year-old, like they died after 4 years. They're not fully formed. Like you give emotions to a
Yeah.
robot, and that robot didn't have time to process those emotions. I mean, we humans, we suck, and we get like a good 20, 30 years till we
Yeah.
become fully formed adults. I mean, my kids, oh my God, they have no fucking cleanse. They are so difficult to deal with. I mean, because they're not fully formed. And so I think that, like, if somebody had brought that into the table, that fascination with like if somebody had told Rutger Howard, like, play this as if you were a toddler, like, like this is how you need to play. And there's a little bit of it. They are playful. Like I think Daryl Hannah's character is a little bit playful and stuff,
Yeah.
but they really need to feel more like. I think there was a little bit of it, but it was just not fully formed in there. Like
Yeah.
that they're just not they're just babies, and that's why they don't know what they're doing is wrong, or at least misguided, or is not going to get them what they need, and
Well,
they're going to make them
I was going to just say I completely agree with you. I've never once thought about that until you brought it up right now. But it'd be nice for them to play on the age thing a little bit more. I don't think that they're exactly the same as a 4-year-old because they're when they first wake up and they're like, you know, brought online or whatever you want to call it when they're awakened or whatever, they have a lifetime of memories implanted in them. So they have like the intelligence and the knowledge and stuff but it's kind of like it's I think it's probably we're supposed to believe that it's not quite the same as a lived experience. That being said, they definitely could have played on that whole age thing more. And also I love that you mentioned the thing about how it's I don't know, it's a nice tight movie the way it ends with him, I mean, what better way to show that Harrison Ford has been affected and changed by this whole ordeal than for him to run off with Rachel, like with the, with romantic intent, for them to just run off into the sunset together. He clearly accepts her as an equal and as a human and stuff like that. But I completely agree with you. It would be a far better movie if we had time to see him regret all the things that he's done in his lifetime of working as a Blade Runner.
I think you can argue that he's having those moments while he's looking at like watching him make that speech.
Sure, I
So
guess.
I mean, I don't completely detract that from the movie, but yeah, one thing I was gonna ask before I should have Matt like get in here as well, but and maybe Matt can answer this as well if he remembers.
Okay.
But the scene with Rachel, where he's sort of abusive initially, like where he's kind of like forcing her to like him or to kiss him. What's going on there? Like, because I know after that they kind of worked it out and they fell in love, but what was that like? That beat there where like he kind of became like the abusive boyfriend or something.
Matt, do you want to take that one or no?
Jason, you can go ahead.
I mean, if I had to guess, I think that was just. I would guess. I've never read the script. I don't know what was it. This is a People's script, right?
Yes.
Yeah. David Webb Peoples. I don't know what he wrote, if in the action lines, if they were really all that specific about it. I would guess that, just like a lot of movies, when there's a scene, the actors and the directors all get together and they probably try to talk about how can we make this interesting, and they try different things and they just don't want to be cliche and obvious. And if I had to guess, I'd say that they were like, how can we make this sexy? And it's like, this is 1982 and Harrison Ford is a big strong male with magnitude and everything and presence, and they were like, let's have him be a nice guy and he's not going to force himself on her, but he's going to be very forceful. I don't know.
Well,
I think he's just he wants her and he knows that she wants him, and rather than letting her leave, he's like shutting the door in front of her, and he's pushing up against her and saying, ask me to kiss you, like, ask me
yeah.
to do this, because he doesn't want to literally force himself on her, but he is being quite forceful.
Wasn't it Hitchcock who always said that love scenes should be played like
Yeah.
murder scenes, and murder scenes should be played like love scenes, or something like that?
I believe it
I
was
don't
him.
know, but yeah,
You definitely see a lot of that in North by Northwest.
yeah, somebody might have taken him a bit too literally, but uh, I don't
Yeah,
know.
give
I'll,
give me
I'll say this much: I've never tried those lines on a girl before.
Yeah, no, definitely. I don't know. Is it an like an early '80s thing that it's just a machismo, sexist thing, or I thought that it was Deckard uh, playing off of his bias against them because he hunts them for a living. So I thought that he was like his first instinct is to boss around the attractive them and like him. I thought that was what it was. And then after that, it seems like it went away. He didn't do that anymore. But that scene just doesn't play well for me. I don't know if it's like just doesn't like didn't stand the test of time, or if they were going for showing Deckard's bias and like negative side, but then he kind of like, because he is like an anti-hero in a way, like noir should be. But yeah, I don't know. That scene just doesn't play well for me, amongst others. But I gotta give you credit. It's definitely trying to do something. It just doesn't do it as well as other movies, and
That I
and I think it's
completely
worth
agree.
mention. And it's worth mentioning like 2049. I started by saying that, the whole thing is an exploration of Ryan Gosling's character, Kay, which interestingly, it's kind of a cool choice, Kay, because it's I think it's the main character in
Mhm.
Franz Kafka's the Trial. In any case, Kafka is very big on like giving like first letter names to his characters. So I think it was an interesting. I wonder if that's what it was going when they were going for, but yeah, I think Kay's journey is a lot more interesting than anything in Blade Runner because he's a robot who for a moment thinks that he might be the closest thing to a human that's ever been in the robot world, that he was this child that was born to Rachel and Deckard, only to then find out that he's not. Uh, and that's what it means to be human. I mean, that's like more so, not as much as like some other movies, but it's still it's a journey, and you take it with him. Like he's the main character. It's not like the side character like Rachel and Rutger Hauer and in the original Blade Runner, they're side characters, even though you can still make that point with a side character. But I feel like in 2049 it really just goes deeper into that because you're with them the entire time. So it's a more interesting journey. It still is not. I don't know why it doesn't like get me all the way there, but I still think it does a better job than the original to at least being focused on it on most scenes that this is what they're going for, this is what they're developing, and this is where they get to in the end.
Yeah. Let me completely agree and also add some thoughts as well to that. um, I before diving completely into the sequel film, I was just going to say that I wasn't the one who said this. I remember some review that I was watching of the original Blade Runner um, said something, and I don't remember how exactly they phrased it, but I thought it was dead on. But this goes hand in hand with the title of the movie and the poster and everything about it. You think is going to be an action movie, and it kind of like lets you down with that. But the intro of the movie, where the words on the screen, and they're kind of like giving you an idea of what this world is and who the Blade Runners are and who the replicants are, what they are, and all these. It's setting you up for this movie. You know, um, they talk about how there's these detectives and these things, and then there's the elite ones, the best of the best, whose whole job is to hunt replicants down and retire them, and they are dun 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 the Blade Runners. You know, for all that buildup, despite me liking this movie, there is no discernible skill or talent that Harrison Ford, that Deckard, ever displays in the entire film, other than what you'd find on an average detective.
Yes, no, for sure. That's one of the many issues that I have, and it's good you bring it up. You're making points for me,
Yeah,
but
no. I mean,
no,
these are the problems I have with the
because
movie.
for one thing, there's only one Blade Runner. I never see any other ones.
Well, the guy who dies in the beginning is supposed to be one.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
The one in the office. I thought he was just like an
Yeah.
administrative person
Well,
doing
exactly.
a
No discernible skills whatsoever.
I think Kay was designed to be a Blade Runner potentially, but Deckard needed to be kind of like a Jack Nicholson, even though Jack Nicholson makes a lot of mistakes in Chinatown, and that's okay because detectives are flawed. They tend to be overly confident in their instincts,
Yeah.
and Deckard should have had some more innate ability to detect,
Exactly.
and then have that backfire on him or
Yeah.
something.
So I was going to say, and this leads to the 2049 thing. When I see, I don't want it to. I don't. When I watch this movie, I'm not hoping to see some sort of physical talents or something like that they have, some sort of special training that makes them amazing or whatever. The thing that I think this movie like just glosses over, which could have been far more interesting, is the whole like like the Turing test thing that he has them doing with the little briefcase machine. You
Mhm.
know, but they use it twice in the beginning. If these Blade Runners are like these guys who've had extensive psychological training or something, and they train them to be able to spot stuff, like they're almost like Gestapo agents or something like that, only for replicants. You know, that would have been more interesting if they could have found a way to work that into the story, and you just don't get it. You know, I mean, like there's not really anything in the scene where he's talking to the stripper girl with the snake. He is being like a good detective. He's putting on a fake voice. He's putting on a fake personality, and he's acting like he's there to. I can't remember. Was he supposed to be there to interview her, or I don't remember what his ruse was. But he's there
Yeah,
talking
like
to
a
her.
magazine or something.
Something, yeah. And everything about it is absolutely what I'd
Oh,
expect
no, it
from.
was like something like I think it was like occupational rights or something, like if
Oh,
she's
right,
being
right.
like
Yes, I'm
abused. Yeah,
sorry. You're
something
right.
like that. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. You're absolutely right. He's like an OSHA guy or something. Anyway, point is that it's a great scene. His performance is great. Her performance is great. The writing is great. It's exactly what I'd expect from any other noir detective movie where he's talking to a suspect who he doesn't want her to know that she's a suspect. And then it turns on him, and she ends up getting violent and running away. You know, it's fine. It's a fine scene. There's nothing terribly wrong with it. That would have been a scene where they could have amped it up to 10 and like up to 11, you know, and really done something really fascinating and really interesting, like to show that these guys have some sort of training to spot these replicant things or something like that, you know. But anyway, the whole reason I was bringing that up is just to say that I know that over the decades and stuff, that since this movie came out, because of the unicorn scene where he has a dream about the unicorn, and that makes him question himself because like for instance, I think Edward James Olmos or something like that gives him the little unicorn at the end and stuff like that, and it just kind of makes him question himself a bit, because he's like, wow, gosh, I've been sitting here telling Sean Young, Rachel, that her memories are implanted, and she doesn't know that she's not real. How do I know that I'm not real and whatever? But I mean, they make it pretty clear that he is a normal human being. But that is something that people have talked about over decades. Is like, what if Deckard himself was? What if that's what made him so special? That he was a replicant Blade Runner or something like that. And I know that it's not necessarily something that's like in the movie, but it's one of the things I think is so fantastic about the sequel is that when they're making this movie, they thought about all these little things, you know, that I just think really add to the movie, like the fact that it's like, okay, so now we're going to have a whole movie, just like Gil was saying. It's so interesting because now it's all about the replicant, and you know, he is created to be a Blade Runner. So now we get a sequel that's exploring kind of what all those people were kind of just guessing about and talking about and hinting, you know, with their little fan theories, you know, and stuff. And then all the little stuff they did, like, you know, the opening scene with where he goes to the little grub farm or whatever, you know, where he goes and retires Dave Batista or whatever, you know.
Mhm.
Mm.
uh I didn't know this until like about a year ago, but like that scene, it's not word for word or anything, but it's very, very similar to an alternate opening that Ridley Scott was thinking about doing with Deckard. He was going to have a scene similar to that just to show what Blade Runners do, kind of thing. But then they thought it'd be much better to have him be like retired, kind of like he doesn't do that stuff anymore, and then he's eating the noodles, and then that was like a better opening for him, kind of, you know. But they put that in the movie, and I think it's a great opening, you know, and it leads to all the other things in the movie and so on and so forth. It gets the whole mystery investigation going and everything. And then, you know, you were talking about how he's such a great character and stuff, because we get to explore that with him. You know, I mean, I think the reason why Joy, the Anna de Armas character, my favorite part of the entire movie, really, I think it's so interesting that they went that route. I think that she elevates this movie in a big way because it's like, you know, by making Ryan Gosling a a replicant Blade Runner, you see from the graffiti on his door and the way his own police officers treat him, that humans hate the replicants. You know, they don't like them. They still use the slurs and everything. They call them like skin job or something like that, whatever the hell they call them. So he's an outcast from all the humans. And then when he goes to the prostitutes, you see that even though replicants are a pretty common thing in this world now, all the replicants hate him too because he's a Blade Runner. So he can't have a normal relationship. Everybody hates him. So he has Joy.
Who is neither a human or a replicant.
He has a robot. Yeah, he has a artificial girlfriend because
like they took it one. It's like the third level of the dream in Inception. Yeah. It's like the third level of artificial intelligence.
It's like this. I don't want to get too deep into it or anything. I think, you know, I gave this thing the highest rating out of the three of us. I think that Blade Runner 2049 would be a phenomenal movie if her character wasn't even in it. Well, I shouldn't say phenomenal. That's a little much. It'd be a very good movie, and it'd probably be a great movie. It'd probably still be as good, if not better, than Blade Runner. But the fact that they took the time to explore, I mean, her character has nothing to do with his investigation. She has nothing to do. She is just there to develop him as a person, as a character. Their relationship is phenomenal. They like are so in love with each other, even though she's fake, even though she doesn't even have a tangible body, you know, and he tries so much to like make it as real as it can be, you know, and when people notice that he's living that way, he doesn't seem ashamed of it or anything like that. Their whole thing is just outstanding. And like you said, it's like they took the time to explore that one layer of the onion deeper. And I just think it really elevates the whole movie.
Yeah. No, I mean, and then I guess one thing I should say before I forget is to go back to my initial theory, and this could lead into something Matt will have plenty of opinions about, is that I do think that the aesthetics, like the emphasis on the aesthetics of these movies, the kaleidoscope nature of the locations, the world, the color schemes, in both movies, I almost feel like in some ways it overshadows the story itself. And it's ironic that someone like Roger Deakins, who is the master of being the invisible cinematographer, like he makes beautiful movies that don't look like they're even lit, that he took this on, which was brave of him because it was definitely a departure for him. It's almost like the point of the movie. It's almost like it's a movie that's, I think we've discussed this with other ones. I don't know if it was Inception or like a movie that's designed to be a movie, that knows that it's a movie and embraces the fact that it's a movie. And maybe that's why, to me, it detracts from the actual substance of what's actually going on, because there's too much stuff to feast your eyes on that you're losing like the plot in a way. But obviously that this is why we have these discussions. After hearing what Jason said about the original, I totally appreciate that I maybe not didn't dig too deep into it. I mean, I got all those things while I was watching it, but it was just not as impactful as when Jason explained it. And I admitted myself that 2049 was more impactful, but still something about it just didn't take me all the way to the finish line, like some other sci-fi movies that I really like. So I don't know. I don't know what you think, Matt, about the both these movies have a thing about the camera work and the lighting. It's almost like a character in the movie, right? Like more so than most movies.
Yeah. So I've been pretty much silent for like what, 40 minutes now?
Yeah, no, that's why I want to bring you in. And if you have to comment about anything else, just
geez. I think if I voiced every comment that I had,
no, yeah.
we'd be talking for another 40 minutes. Well, actually, probably another 4 hours. But Roger Deakins definitely took a lot from Jordan Cronenweth in 2049. I mean, there is a really consistent motif in how these movies were handled visually in moving lights. The lights were always moving. And I think that that's a world building element. I can't really tell you whether or not I extrapolated some kind of message from it. I think it just kind of looked futuristic and awesome, and I mean, both movies are just absolute cinegasms from the beginning to the end. I mean, there are a few visual cues that are important, but I mean, if you're going to ask me like why, they were like projecting hard lights into water and creating like that textural movement of water uh, on the ceilings to all I can say is that the only reason that I ever did that in a movie was because it looked cool.
Yeah.
And I've done that in movies because it looks cool. So yeah. But I want to kind of address this. Jason, hey, you've used the word several times, like, real versus fake.
Sure.
Like, are you real when it comes to, the replicants and everything like that? And I actually think that cuts to the bone of my issue, at least with the first movie, if not also with the second movie. Because they are real. The question is, are they conscious? And how do we actually measure that? How do we actually experience that? And from a philosophical and scientific standpoint, this is one of the biggest mind fucks that you can get. Forgive my French, but
yes,
in that, like, we really don't know where consciousness comes from. Like, there is no conscious center of the brain. There is no part of the brain that we can say, like, oh, if we damage this, you might not be conscious anymore. And yet consciousness is the one thing that can't be an illusion, because we're all aware of our own being. And there is so much to explore there. And that's where movies like, Ex Machina, and I would argue Dark City, come in, where, like, okay, you're conscious of it even if it's not real. You're aware of it even if it's not real, but don't we have an ethical obligation to these conscious creatures? Because they're aware of something even if it's not real. I mean, like, for all we know, we could all be an artificial intelligence in some box in some, grand scheme, just kind of like running a bunch of hypothetical universes through experiments to see, how things are going to turn out. I mean, but we're still aware, and still there's an ethical obligation. And I think that that's something that was just utterly glossed over. And it seems like that's kind of the real meat of the story, is that you're living among these people, or these machines are living among us, and they're designed to be indistinguishable from your average human being. So why isn't there a serious question of don't we have an ethical obligation to these people at some point, or to these machines at some point? Like, why aren't we actually dealing with that? And I don't think that we actually ever did deal with that.
Yeah, I think if it wasn't clear from what I said way back at the beginning of this whole
Yeah.
thing, I think that this concept, I guess, is the best way to put it, is easily one of the most fertile concepts in all of science fiction. There's so many aspects of it to go into and to talk about and to explore and address. I don't think you're wrong at all. I think that that's not only is that a very good thing that probably should have been talked about. I think it's probably sucks that they didn't at least address it in some way, shape, or form. All I can say is that, these movies are focused on other aspects of the concept, just like other movies that, explore this stuff are more laser focused on that. I think a good one for all the people out there who, are interested in anime, Ghost in the Shell 2 very much addresses exactly what you were just talking about, and so I don't know. I mean, it's weird. I think it maybe if they made 5 of these movies, or I mean, they did make a TV show. I never saw it. I don't know if you guys ever glanced at that.
Well, I mean, Black Lotus is still on, right? But
I don't know.
I don't know. Huh?
Talking about Blade, it's like in the Blade Runner universe, or
Yeah, there's a Blade
Yeah.
Runner TV show of some kind. I don't know how many episodes they did or whatever, but I mean, I think that the universe they created is definitely one where you could tell a great deal of, or let's say a very well told story that completely addresses what Matt was just saying. And certainly neither of these movies even dip their toe into
Yeah.
that aspect of the universe.
Yeah, I am concerned about that criticism coming from me, though, that, it's one of those things that I've made the same argument a few times about, like, well, if you want that movie to be made, why don't you make it yourself? Or, why, if you want that emphasis to be placed on it, why don't you write your own damn script, or,
Yeah.
your own damn novel or something like that? But I mean, I'm kind of viewing this through the lens of, at my last full-time nine to five job, was always viewed as a missed opportunity, and it's also just something that's so clear an opportunity. I don't know how it wasn't addressed. I mean, you're dealing with something that is so clearly and obviously interesting, and especially with Blade Runner, because the replicants are pretty much identical to humans. You can't help but compare it to a movie like Ex Machina, where the android character, I don't know if you would call her an android or whatever, Alicia Vikander, um, at least through the majority of the movie, doesn't look like a human, but the whole point is like a reverse Turing test.
Yeah.
And that's freaking interesting. Uh, I mean, that's engaging from beginning to end.
It's also a very small movie, though.
Yeah, but I mean, to Gil's earlier point about themes, I don't know. I'm straining to find the real theme here, and the theme that I would go to if I'm, if I'm delving into this kind of territory, would be, where do you get the right to pull the trigger uh, against one of these machines? Because how do you know that you're not just murdering somebody who is just like you just for existing?
Yeah, it goes into the due process thing that I mentioned. That like that's definitely
Yeah.
something they didn't give them.
Well, and
But at the same time, they're killing machines, so you can't always like handcuff them.
yeah, I actually, this just popped into my head. There might be an issue with these movies in that it's too stacked with ideas, because you can have a whole movie that's just built around, okay, what is consciousness? When do we actually have a moral obligation to other people? And that's a movie like Ex Machina. But then there's another element to the movie, which is memories. And do memories make the man or woman or whatever? Uh, and that's a movie like Dark City. And the entire movie of Dark City is built around that question of, do our memories make us who we are? Are we the result of our prior causes, or are we, or is there something innate within us? So there's a question of free will there, and that's a whole nother movie. So, I mean, if anything, if anything, Blade Runner might have stacked itself with way too many concepts to actually focus in on one thing and make a statement about it.
I would argue that you're entirely right. And just like earlier, I brought
Oh,
up
thank you.
I brought up well, I would say that you're entirely right in the way you've thought about it. I would just say that I'm not necessarily as critical as you are about it, because I also brought up Ghost in the Shell earlier too. That's another world that I feel has the same problem. I think what you're talking about is these science fiction worlds that some, visionary person thought up and created, or a number of people in this case. And it's just a world that's very well thought out, and the rules are explained to you, and it's fertile ground for your brain to think about it and go, gosh, this brings up all these conundrums that need to be talked about and discussed. But rather than just have an unfocused movie that's about 30,000 things and none of them really get 30,000. That's ridiculous. Let's say like a dozen different things, right? Like
Just an
I mean, like,
exaggeration.
yeah. I mean, I'm just kind of throwing out numbers here, but yeah, like rather than having this one thing that's like movie that tries to dip its toe into 12 different aspects of this very complex world and concepts that are brought up by it. Both, I would argue that Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049 both decide instead to focus very much on just one small aspect of those things. And I don't think that that's a bad thing that they did that, but I completely agree with you that it's fertile ground. You could, I think, good filmmakers could make other movies about those things, particularly after the second one, because if you read the little prologue thing, and especially if you see the little short films that are on the Blu-ray, they talk about how the big difference between the first movie and the second one is that in the 30-year gap, Deckard in the first movie, he's running around chasing these Nexus 6 and
Mhm.
robots, replicants, and he's been doing that for most of his life, and they just got good enough to create Rachel, the one that's so lifelike and so human like that she doesn't even know that she's a replicant. And I think there's even a line of dialogue that like that the creator guy, whatever his name is, he says something about that it took him a long time. We don't see it, of course.
Tyrell.
Thank you, Tyrell.
Yeah.
So I was searching for his name. I think he even says something after they're all done that it took him an abnormally long time to realize that she was not human or something like that. So it's like they've just gotten to that point, and they've just gotten to the point that she could actually, that they've created one that can actually, reproduce and stuff like that. So it's like a new quantum leap for them and whatever, right? But they say that in the 30 years since that time, the Tyrell company has gone out of business. Jared Leto's company has come in and bought up all their old stuff, and that before, or there's this massive blackout or something that ruined a whole bunch of the way that everybody was living and all the records and things like that. And then in the aftermath of that, this other company, the replicants were completely done away with, but as a need, he brought them back. He used that technology to create new replicants, these Nexus, or not Nexus, but whatever 8 models, that they created. He says that they had the Nexus 8 models or something like that were all around at the time, that were even more advanced than the ones we saw in the first movie. But they're saying that they brought back these replicants, and the big difference is that they're obedient. They're not like the ones from the first movie. That's what I found really interesting about the second one. That's a little bit of an interesting twist. Ryan Gosling's character Kay, the villainous replicant Love, and all the other ones, the prostitutes and all the ones that we see, except for, of course, the one at the beginning, Sapper, the one that Dave Bautista plays. All of the replicants that we see are obedient replicants. They're ones that they've been made in a way that they cannot, disobey. And so they live a very different life than the previous ones. And that's one of the reasons, Gil, you were mentioning this whole thing about him hunting down the others of his own kind. But he says to Dave Bautista, he says, I don't hunt down my own kind. He's like, you guys are the only ones that run, you old school ones, the Nexus 8 ones. He goes, you're the only ones that disobey and run. He says, what he's saying is, if you were just good, they wouldn't retire you, And then for the rest of the movie, you've got Ryan Gosling doing this whole thing where he's like interacting with Robin Wright, his lieutenant, his police lieutenant, and he's like trying to please her, like he's trying to be the greatest version of himself that he can possibly be. And same thing with Love, the other one. She's like, I think there's some line at the end where the two of them, they're almost like feuding siblings or something. They're like, I'm the best. No, I'm the best. Like their entire existence is like servitude. They want to be the best they can be for the humans, kind of thing. So it's interesting because in a way it all ties into what Matt was just saying. Like these, there's a moral question there, about creating life that's exactly the same as humans in every way, shape, and form. Like their brain is just as complex, from all that we can tell, at least. They seem to have feelings, but yet they're created in a way where they can't disobey.
No, it's all interesting stuff, like whether it's the original or the first one. And I agree with a lot of what's been said about its fruitful ground and stuff. And maybe they're just, I guess maybe, the crime that both these movies have is that they're so not subtle about the aesthetics, but story and the themes. And I like subtlety in stories, but I feel like it's a bit too much in both of them. Because they don't, like Matt's example, Ex Machina. Yeah, let's face Ex Machina or the Star Trek episode that shall not be named. They're a bit, they can be considered too much not on the nose, but they deal with the subject head on. And obviously, movies or stories should explore those themes not directly, like indirectly, because that's when they're like close to the heart. But I do feel like with these two movies, there's a lot, like just having a story happen in this universe where there's humans and robots and holograms, you're gonna find it's like the Bible. Like it's so rich with possibilities that you're gonna find themes and threads of thoughts everywhere, but it's not very focused.
Yeah.
It just doesn't feel very well calibrated. Like I gave a little spiel about 2001. Ex Machina is a good example. I mentioned Moon, which is another movie that, and I understand about you saying that this is like these are big movies, but are they? I mean, they're not big action movies. They are very intimate stories in a way. There's been big movies that try to, have a lot to say. I mean, Lawrence of Arabia, there's those sorts. I like The Bridge on the River Kwai is like one of my favorite like epic movies. And that movie is
Great.
like crazy. Yeah, I actually like
Okay.
it more than Lawrence of Arabia.
Oh, me too.
Yeah, so those are movies that build and build and then just fucking break your heart. Like Moon, there's a few other examples that just, they live in this world where they create all these situations, all these interactions between characters, and it all adds up to something. And I don't feel like these two movies add up to that much. It's there,
Yeah.
and you can suck it out of it, like if you really look for it, but and that's why the pretty images are there to keep you occupied,
Yeah.
but they just don't reach any sort of conclusion, catharsis. I don't know for me, but I've already acknowledged that I can totally understand what Jason saw in it and maybe others see in it, but I think we've all acknowledged that whether it's lack of tension in the original, or being slightly boring for detective story, or the fact that just the running time being so different, but they feel like almost the same length, is all admissions that these movies are
Uh,
imperfect.
for all this discussion, sorry, I keep coming back to actually Minority Report
Mm-hmm.
as
Yeah, that's a good
like
example. I should have thought of that.
I mean I watch Minority Report once a year at least, and I've seen it every year since it came out.
Wow.
I basically have it memorized.
It's your
Uh,
hobby.
uh, yeah,
That's-
and I mean that's a movie that is a perfect example of it's entertaining, and when you get to the end of the movie, it's like, all right, if you're just there to watch Tom Cruise run and kick ass like he's been doing for 60 years now, you're going to get your fill. If you want to think about the movie, it is 100% about free will. And it has a statement to make at the end of the movie. So it feeds both stomachs. you know, it's something that is entertaining from beginning to end, but if you want to go that extra step and really examine what the movie is trying to say, it's that much better.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's crazy that it's criminal that I haven't thought about like big action sci-fi movies. No, and I rated that movie a 9, so it goes to show
Hey.
you. I was looking it up, but yeah,
Yeah.
that's a very good example of a big action sci-fi movie that really had something to say, and dug really really deep, but was also extremely entertaining while doing it. It's possible to do it. Is it an all-time classic? It's not a 2001, but it's up there. I think Spielberg. So it's definitely one of his best movies. Yeah, that's how it's done. Yeah, that's like that's how a good technician takes a story and elevates it and stays focused on the subject matter and what it's trying to do. Yeah.
You know, that's also kind of an interesting movie in that the entire I mean, even the title is a MacGuffin. Yeah, like it didn't actually matter for the okay, I'm digressing. I'll stop, but
Oh, the yeah, well, leave that for the episode we'll do about it in who knows when.
Yeah.
but yeah,
Um,
for anybody who has listened to this point, go watch Minority Report.
Oh yeah, good
Um,
movie.
Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
that's one recommendation we can make. Oh, I'll listen to this kind of stuff. They are kind of long, especially the sequel, but it's definitely they're definitely a visual feast for the eyes, and there's some ideas in there for sure. So I think that's
Yeah.
the
I
conclusion.
was gonna say real quick the you guys were talking about the cinematography comparing the first one and the sequel, you know, and
Mhm.
how I would agree with you that Roger Deakins, while he makes beautiful movies, they're not like big flashy movies in the cinematography, really, not usually anyway. But
Well, he picks his moments. He's
yeah,
the type
well,
of cinematographer. He
absolutely,
picks his moments instead of like dropping a silhouette here and there.
yeah.
But
Well,
he's not very
yeah,
showy through the
1970s.
entire thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The flares and stuff, beautiful. But no, I was just going to say it's just interesting because I completely agree with you that he about that aspect of him, and this was the movie that finally got him his Oscar.
which is sad.
Why? It's a beautiful movie.
Uh,
Yeah, no, it goes back
And
to what the
yeah.
he should have
discussion,
got
like,
it the year
remember
before.
when Children of Men lost to Pan's Labyrinth, and yeah,
Oh,
Pan's Labyrinth had better lighting, but Children of Men reinvented how to use a camera. I
that's
mean,
true.
come on, that's
Yeah.
cinematography is also moving the camera. But yes, there is a thing about, and I said this about Spielberg before, moving the camera as a director's medium and
Mm,
lighting as a cinematographer's medium. Even though cinematographers have a lot of say as to where to place the camera sometimes, or how to move the camera, or choice of lenses. Um, but let's face it, Fincher chooses how to move his camera.
yeah.
Spielberg chooses how to move. There's some, like I think Zemeckis said like that he let Dean Cundey basically do all the cinematography, like choose all the camera angles and all the movements in Back to the Future movies. But not everybody's Robert Zemeckis. Like, most directors are very specific about so that's why I think the Academy rewards lighting and not camera
Yeah.
work.
In my personal experience, yeah, the director picks where the camera goes, and I fix it with the lighting.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
And Roger Deakins is really good at it, but yeah, so and I
yeah.
really think that he fed into it from the original, that he said like, well, this movie, it's a character in the movie, the lighting and the
Yeah.
locations and all that. It creates this like eerie mood about like the viewer that transport this alternate universe that will never really exist. LA is never going to look like that, but it's okay because it's the movies, and it's nice to take yourself to a different place. And he fully embraced it, and that's why he went over the top with the moving lights, moving hard lights, and the reflections. And he basically went all out because he had the license to do it. It was the right movie for it. So much like he picks his moments for silhouettes and
Yeah.
movies and flashy lightings, he picked the
Skyfall.
movie to go all flashy all the time. you know, and this was the movie.
Yeah.
So he's just that good. He really knows he picks his moments, whether it's like the specific movie or shots within a movie.